Hello, sports fans out there. This is Coach Eric Johnson, EJ, the brand.
And Coach Aaron, the source.
Aaron, man, a lot's been transpiring lately. We've had a lot of baseball. We had the Major League Baseball draft. And, one of the subjects is, high school players versus college players. When do guys, turn pro? Should they do it in high school? Should they do it in college? We talk about money. We talk about this NIL likeness, image likeness, and all kinds of these factors that are important or decisions that these young people have to make, whether they're going to turn pro or they're going to go to college. When is the right time, Aaron?
Right. Yeah, this is an interesting subject because, just this week, it just seems like we had 4 athletes drafted in Major League Baseball.
Right.
Between the two of us.
Right.
And then we've got a local kid signing $1 million for a program that he's going to.
Right.
High schooler. And we've got the NCAA name, image, likeness. I don't know what you call it, but maybe a decision.
Right.
And so the landscape of youth and prep sports and college sports has I think made a pretty major shift. And I just got some initial thoughts on it. And,
right.
And I think there's some good and some bad. First of all, I've never been a fan of the NCAA. I in college I used to call it the no cash for athletes at all. That's what NCAA stands for.
Exactly. Right.
And so I don't have fond memories. I have fond memories of my collegiate career, but not how we were necessarily treated as athletes. Just too authoritarian and too strict for what the return that they were getting from athletes. So I'm glad to see that stranglehold loosen up. But
right.
With that said, what does that mean for today's athlete and the landscape? And again, me being a little bit of a cynic, I worry now that the vultures really might come out. If you just look at the proliferation of social media in the last few years and how it's affected athletics, where you've got the YouTube sensations and the Instagram athletes. And, again, I'm a purist at heart and kind of old school. And it's just like, okay, the lines between personality and ability
right.
are starting to get blurred. Back in our day, you may have had maybe 1 or 2 athletes that did that, like Bosworth. He was kind of all show, right. But really didn't bring anything, once he got to the professional level.
Right.
But he was good in college. But I'm just saying, that sort of self-promotion and branding has gone crazy, and I think is really just going to take off. And so who's going to really protect the athlete now from those people out there who might want to exploit that, and some of those being their own parents?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Quick cash. I call it quick cash.
Yeah. So I don't know. It like I said, it's a double-edged sword. I'm glad to see that, the athletes are having more autonomy about their careers and
right.
in terms of how they can make their money. But, again, what things are going to be in place to protect these athletes, and, what advice or counseling is going to be out there. You've got the NFL where, every year those guys go sit in a room and they're lectured on, hey, this is how you should spend your money. This is what you should do, da 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 da. But how many of those guys listen to that? And they're in their early and mid 20s and later. So how are you going to get an 18, 19-year-old? And of course, the young man was a 16-year-old who just signed for $1 million locally. Oh. So who's watching over these athletes so that they're doing the right things with their money, they're setting themselves up with a future in sports and outside of sports. There's a lot of questions to be answered. And I'm, again, just kind of afraid for some of the athletes out there and some of the stories we're going to end up hearing 5-10 years from now.
Right. You know, Aaron, it's kind of like the dash for cash. That's what I call it. And I find out that athletes may have representation. They may not. They may hear from friends and or people in the street that tell them, hey, do this, do that, and that's all they have. I think what needs to happen is there needs to be classes, as they are for the NFL and stuff, but there needs to be mentors set up. Mentors that have either made good decisions about how they spend their money, to those who did not make good decisions and their story is told.
Right.
So it's almost like that Scared Straight story, right? You see on television that, hey, I'm gonna show you this and you don't want to be involved in this. Both sides of the story need to be told to all these athletes that are embarking in professional sports, because it can't be one-sided, because one side only gives you a certain side of it, and okay, that's what I'm supposed to do. But what happens if you don't do that? Here's the other side, and here's the two sides. What side do you want to pick? Now the athlete is accountable and understands,
right?
You know, I've been educated about the good side, the bad side, you know, and what do I need to do? So the sport itself, whether it's baseball, football, basketball, whatever, track and field, soccer, gymnastics, whatever, there needs to be some sort of group, whether it's one group under different type of each sport, that goes out and speaks to these athletes and educates the parents, because basically at the end of the day, a lot of this stuff is happening to a small group of people, and they don't have a network where they can just dive in and say, hey, help me.
Right.
Help me.
I mean, hey, the NCAA is still going to be making a lot of money. Why don't they put together a program? One of the things I think is mandatory viewing for any kid now should be the 30 for 30 Broke series.
Absolutely. That's great series, right? Great
I
series.
think the kids should see that. The other thing too is not just from the financial side, because there's going to be a big rush for athletes to want to use their, you know, to leverage their likeness and their name. Right. And I think there needs to be education on aligning yourself with the proper products. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't want to be a 16-year-old and maybe align yourself up with the wrong product just because they're putting some money in front of you. And all of those things I still think need to be done strategically, rather than, okay, hey, they're giving me $10,000 to wear this on their t-shirt.
Right.
And that's good enough for me. And I guess you can go about things that way, but if you're really talking about building the right image and branding and career, I think that takes a level of expertise that a 16, 17-year-old isn't gonna have, even a 20-year-old, and most parents aren't gonna have. So maybe I'm creating a whole new industry. But
I was gonna say, ding it for the source and the brand coming up with a new industry that looks pretty cool.
Yeah, but I at least think that those things should be thought about and be strategically implemented, versus just, hey, you know, again, they're gonna let me wear their shoes, their equipment, or they're gonna give me some free. For instance, a company came by the facility and they wanted to give me free energy drinks. And I'm like, well, do these have caffeine? They said, yeah. I said, I can't take them. All of my kids, most of these kids are high schoolers. They shouldn't be drinking that. So do you want a kid out there who's schlepping for, you know, some kind of energy drink when it's really not that great for them? Or vaping, a vaping product, or, you know, all of these things that, yes, are accessible to kids, but might not necessarily be best for them. And then also, I guess, people being realistic about your kids' talent and marketability. You may have parents who are going to chase that when it's really not a viable option. And what about now recruiting becomes not just a matter of who has the best facilities, because that's the dog and pony show. Now it's like, hey, who's in the best market? You know, should I go to this school in Nebraska? It's Nebraska, but you know what? UCLA is in the LA market. So there's going to be some inequities and disparities just based on that. And kids might make decisions based solely on that. So now, does academics become the third rung in the ladder of making a choice? So I just see this going in so many, many directions. And like I said, our school's gonna cry foul because they're in smaller markets. You know, in football, kids don't go to some schools just because they're in smaller conferences because they don't have the TV exposure. Well, what do you think is really gonna happen now when they can take their name, image, and likeness and go to bigger TV markets?
Oh man, it's crazy. It's crazy the money that's involved in this, and you know, it's a business now. And I hate to say that, but it really is a business now, and it didn't used to be that way. But it's a business now. It's big business for these families and their young student athletes. It is, and it's just the way it has been created.
Yeah. What about the relationship now with boosters and people who own companies that are boosters? You know, hey, if you come to Oregon, well, we've got Joe's Concrete and so-and-so's Apple Sticks and so-and-so's, you know, yogurt. They've all put up X amount of dollars to sponsor sponsor athletes. So now on that, is there going to be a list of sponsors that athletes can potentially be introduced to when they sign with a particular school? I just see this going a lot of different ways, and I don't know if that's all good or not. You know, I guess only time will tell.
Well, you're going to see a lot of college athletes with agents.
Oh yeah.
or I should say advisors.
Yeah.
Not advisors. Yeah. Oh, you're not agent, you're my advisor. Oh, he's a life coach. He's your life coach. Yeah. Well, they can't. You get around all this stuff. He's my life coach. Something with life stuff. Right. You know, yeah. I mean, what are they going to tell you? You know, you can't do that. That's perfectly legal, actually.
Yeah. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not hating on the whole thing. I just, you know, I just see how it can go left. Right. And if you don't have your eyes wide open, anything else, it's going to be abused, because people are going to see ways that, you know, they can make money off of these athletes. And maybe it's not the NCAA exploiting them anymore, but maybe it's now these other individuals.
Yeah, they come out of the woodworks, the bloodsuckers, as I call them. So, Aaron, when is the best time to go in the draft? I mean, at the end of the day, you know, all this leads into this next little subject we have is, when is it the right time to go in the draft, turn pro? You know, your high school, college. When are you really ready? I mean, it's been interesting, the amount of studies that they showed about how many major league pitchers they took in the first 2 rounds. You know, in the recent draft, that they're all college guys. You know, there weren't that many high school guys anymore, and position players. Right. You know, they're trying to fill rosters, and as they go through the draft, and when you talk the first 3 or 4 rounds, you know, you see a mixture of players, right? Right. But then you start to get into rounds, you know, I'd say rounds 10 through 20. You start to see these rosters filled with guys so the prospects can play, and you see the majority of the kids being college guys. I saw number one, not many junior college players anymore drafted, and I saw very little high school kids drafted. You know, and then that should be a warning sign to parents that, hey, listen, it might be a good time if your kid is not a blue chip prospect, needs to go to college and get the education and move forward that way, rather than say, okay, let me just take the money, because the money's all slotted now. It's all slotted. It's not where, okay, if you're in the 18th round, you got a chance still on a high school player to earn $450,000, $500,000. That doesn't work anymore. All the money is slotted. So parents need to understand, when is it the right time for your kid to go to college or go in the draft, or in high school, or vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a hard one. I mean, there's so many different factors. I mean, there could be personal factors where kids, really need to go because the family needs the money. But if we
Right.
throw that out, then you got to look at, well, okay, what's the kid's skill set, and what are the experts, the non-biased experts, saying about them? And it kind of goes back to what we always talk about: positioning. You should be always figuring out what's the model that I'm trying to meet, so that you can be positioned to take advantage of the opportunities. So if you don't have some of the metrics that they're looking for to be, say, a top 4 round draft pick, then maybe you say, hey, you know what? Let me see if I can build my skill set a little bit more with another year or 2 of college.
Right.
Before I look at that, I think that, and maybe looking at, hey, well, what's the need in baseball? Sometimes these sports have trends where they're all looking for pitchers one year, or this year they were talking about high school shortstops. But when the rubber met the road, they didn't take a lot of high school shortstops. A lot of those guys got drafted very low. So, maybe trying to read the tea leaves a little bit and anticipating what, might be the hot commodity for that year's draft pick might help you decide as, you know what, I think I'm going to wait. Because maybe, hey, you're a good shortstop, or you're a good cornerback, but there's also 15 others that are better than you that are probably going to, take those slots.
Exactly.
But the next year, there may only be 5 better than you. So maybe you wait a year. It might be kind of hard, but again, that's what I talk about when I mean positioning. It's, hey, timing. So anyway,
timing's everything, Aaron. You know that. Timing's everything. And I think a lot of times, a lot of these athletes they think it's easy to get drafted, Aaron. And they think it's like, okay, I saw my friend get drafted, that's going to be me. And that's not realistic. People need to understand their skill set and what their skill set brings to the table. And what's the grading system? A lot of these kids and their parents don't understand the Major League Baseball grading system.
Right.
That's a whole nother podcast, by the way, Aaron. But the grading system, and it's universal, is a 30 to 80 grading system. And when they hear these guys talk about this stuff on TV, what is it? What's a 50? What's a 40? What's all these numbers? And they need to understand that's how they're being rated. It's pretty universal across the board at the major league level. They use the same thing they've been using for the past 50, 60 years about somebody's skill set and what it means. And they project players. And people don't understand that. They are projecting this guy's potential. It's not like he's a 50 now. He could be a 40 now and then a 50 later. They're going on projections, what this player can be in 4 years, 2 years, 3 or 4 years. What is the window that they feel they can get to the big leagues based on their skill set now? And people don't understand that. And that's where people get hurt and where people get lost in understanding where their child or their athlete is in the sport.
Right.
And I'll tell you, they will be very honest with you and tell you where you're at and where you project at. And I'll tell you, a lot of times people can't take it. It's a tough business, and people's feelings get hurt. But you know what? It is a business, and they're trying to win the World Series, and they're going to project that. That's their job to do that. They are the experts, as I say, and it's that way.
Right. Yeah. I see now, even in track and field, which is a little bit more clear cut, because if you're running the times, you kind of know, okay, that talent is there.
Right.
But again, you've got high schoolers who are talking about going pro, but I think in a sport like track and field, I don't really have a problem with it. It's just that also have your exit strategy. Track and field is one of those sports where, yeah, you can probably run. If you're lucky, you can have a pro career that might be 10 years long. But most athletes, especially track and field, a sprinter, that window might only be 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
And that's why it's such a feat to see some of these athletes stay in that top echelon for 3, even 4 Olympics.
Yeah, that's
and so even if you're not making medals or getting medals, but to be in that conversation, to be in that elite group for that long is really quite a feat, whether you gain a medal or not. Because if you look at the average lifespan, again, of a lot of elite level sprinters, I think it's longer now than when I was running, but it can only be just 2 or 3 years sometimes, especially being the elite of the elite. So I think in a sport like that, you really got to sit back and say, okay, what am I going to be doing after this? How am I going to position myself to have success in regular life as a civilian? Money set aside to finish my degree, or should I just finish my degree now? Or what skill sets am I going to build up during this time to enter the workforce when I'm done? But they should be thinking about that transition and having that in mind when they're making these deals and using these deals to pad those transitions.
Oh, absolutely. And I think a lot of, like you said, a lot of people don't have a plan. And we talk about plan a lot. We talk about management a lot in hardball athletics. And we think it's the most important factor in getting the athlete where they need to be in life, rather than just the short-term fix of playing that sport. So, hey, great subject to talk about today, Aaron. This stuff about when to turn pro, when is the right time, and understanding what you need to do.
Yeah, real intriguing. I'm very interested to see where this goes and how it takes shape in the next few years. It's gonna be something else.
All right, people out there, our listeners. Hey, this is Coach EJ, the brand,
and Coach Aaron, the source. We'll see you.